Hello and welcome to the Patreon weekly Q&A with your host, Robert Polenik. Our goal is to educate you on everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. We want you to know what you need to know and how to apply it in a way that fits you best. So this is the weekly Q&A for C3 Method Patreon members. If you'd like to be able to submit your questions for the Q&A, you can sign up at patreon.com/C3 Method, and the 3 spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E Method. There you go. And you can also find out more about our services and us at c3method.com. Okay. Also on the Patreon channel, you get access to nutrition education, which will teach you how to write your own nutrition programs. We have training program structures that are written for you, and then also structures that you can customize and create your own workouts. And we have the weekly Q&A videos that you're watching now. And then, of course, you can always use the community chat to chat to other members and or ask questions for the weekly Q&A. Cool. Okay, let's get into our first question. Okay, my previous coach had me eat oats for breakfast and lots of sweet potato for daytime meals, including vegetables. In your nutrition video, you mentioned that the source of carbs isn't as important as calories contained within the foods, which makes sense. But are there quote-unquote best carb sources compared to others? Was my coach correct with what they had me eat? Okay, so as I mentioned on our Patreon channel, we do have nutrition education videos. One of the videos teaches you how to write your own nutrition program, and it takes you step by step of what I do with clients, and that way you can do it for yourself. And then if you have any questions, you can ask in the videos, or that's when you would then hire us for the one-on-one type nutrition coaching. My goal with the video is just for people to have what they need to have so they can live a better life and enjoy themselves. And then if you need extra help from there, that's what I would like to help with. So I want to give the answers, give the recipe, and then that way you can start to kind of do it for yourself, and then I can help fill in the gaps. Now, when we look at carbohydrate sources, it is important, but as you said, it isn't as important as calories. So calories are the most important thing, and then it would be protein within our calories. And then the third thing I focused on is distribution and timing of our calories and protein. And then at number 4 would be individual food sources. Now, all of these things blend in. So when you're trying to figure out how many calories you should eat in a day, and then you're figuring out what calories to eat, it would be, reasonable to consider option number 4 as the food sources. So although these are ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, it's not like you can do them necessarily in isolation, or that I recommend doing them in isolation from each other. But it is important to know that if I'm distinguishing between carb sources, say sweet potato versus white potato, that means nothing if I don't already have my calories controlled and accounted for, my protein controlled and accounted for, and then timing and distribution of my food. Those things are going to have a greater impact on whatever your goal is, whether it's fat loss, muscle building, performance, health, yada yada. So that's the idea of the ranking system, is just to let you know where your focus should be, what you should make sure is wrapped up and buttoned up and accounted for first before moving on to the next thing. When we look at carbohydrate sources, that would be an energy source. Another energy source we have is dietary fats. In general, fats are slow digesting energy, so we eat them now, but we don't really get a kind of a burst of energy from them. It's just a nice, slow, sustained energy. And usually fats take multiple hours to digest. So they can help you feel a low level of energy, just good satiety, good fullness between meals, especially if you have a long time gap between meals, say 5, 6, 7 hours or so. Carbohydrates are faster digesting sources of energy, and there's even variableness within carbohydrates. So you can have something that's really slow digesting, such as sweet potato, but then you can have something really fast digesting as like fruit juice or a Gatorade. That can start digesting, actually it starts kind of being absorbed through the lining of your cheeks. It can start being usable and digestible within 5 minutes or so, and arguably even faster than that. But compared to a sweet potato, which still might take 2-3 hours to get some useful energy from it, there's definitely more variability to the energy release with carbohydrates than there are with fats. So fats are slow digesting, carbs are faster digesting, but within carbs, there's a slow and a fast. The idea of the trainer giving you oats for breakfast and then which is a slow digesting carbohydrate, and then also slow digesting carbohydrate during the day, like sweet potatoes, is you maybe have been eating in a calorie deficit. Typically, people aren't going to eat oats and sweet potatoes if they're trying to gain a lot of weight because they are slow digesting. They can potentially limit how much you want to eat because they're so slow digesting. You're not hungry for your next meal for more of a delayed time frame, so then it's a struggle to get enough food in. So typically oats and sweet potatoes are going to be given in a calorie deficit since they are slower digesting carbohydrates, and there's going to be a fibrous kind of helping you go to the bathroom component to oats and sweet potatoes, and especially vegetables as well. So that's likely what the coach was trying to do is, okay, we don't get to eat a lot of calories, but how do we make our calories last longer in regards to feeling fuller and having that slower digestion, and then also helping us go to the bathroom. If we're not eating a lot of calories, that means we're not eating a lot of food. If you're not eating a lot of food, you might not have a lot of material going through your intestinal tract, and you can get constipated, feel bloated. So fibrous foods can help people go to the bathroom more regularly, and that can contribute to you kind of feeling less bloated and constipated. So likely the coach did a good job. That sounds like a good recommendation. They are not the only foods, though, that you can have. You can certainly eat other foods. If you don't like oats, you don't have to eat oats. If you don't like sweet potato, you don't have to eat sweet potato. So me, for example, I actually did an experiment when I was younger where I had the predominant carbohydrate source for my day was sweet potatoes for 8 weeks. And then, I did oats for 8 weeks, then sweet potatoes for 8 weeks, and then jasmine rice for 8 weeks. The idea was to compare how I felt energy-wise, even if the calories were controlled to be the same across each 8-week segment. So I would have eaten the same amount of calories from oats, the same amount of calories from sweet potato, the same amount of calories from the jasmine rice. What I found for myself was when I ate oats, I felt bloated. I had really poor energy. There's definitely a lower conversion of the calories within oats being utilized as energy compared to, say, jasmine rice. So I might eat 100 calories of oats, 100 calories of jasmine rice. I'm going to get a lot more digestible energy from the rice than I would from the oats due to the fiber. So that would have contributed. But what I found was oats for me just wasn't great. I felt bloated, had really little energy, wasn't fun, didn't like those 8 weeks. So then I switched to sweet potatoes. The taste was amazing after just having eaten oats for like 8 weeks. So sweet potatoes actually have a pretty good name. They are sweet. But what I found with that was I struggled to feel hungry enough for my next meal. By the time I would be ready schedule-wise for my next meal, I wasn't hungry enough for it. And I was just force-feeding myself the whole time with sweet potato. And I would try to do, okay, let me do smaller amounts and more frequent meals, and then, try to play around with it all the ways I could. So I like the taste of sweet potato. I would say that I had an okay energy from it, definitely better than the oats, but I felt too full. Then when I switched to jasmine rice, it was, like Goldilocks, the third thing is perfect. So for me, jasmine rice worked really well. I liked the taste. Digestibility was great. Energy was great. The satiety was good enough to get me to my next meal, but then I was hungry enough for my next meal. So really being able to experiment with different carb sources is what I would recommend. Assuming you have your calories accounted for, protein, meal timing and distribution, and then when you're looking at individual carb sources, if you like oats, eat oats. If you like sweet potatoes, eat sweet potatoes. If you don't like them, don't eat them. Try something else. You can actually just do a quick Google search and say, okay, if my meals are 5 hours apart and I like carbohydrates, I can do a Google search and say what carbohydrate sources digest within 5 hours. And that'll give you a ballpark of a list of carb sources that are probably going to give you enough energy from one meal, but not cause you to be too full for the next meal or too ravenous by the next meal. So Google is your friend. You can use that and find out, okay, I have this much time between meals. So maybe you have a crazy schedule and you have 8 hours between meals. You're like, oh man, so what carb sources digest within 8 hours? And you might find, oh, there's not very many. Most carb sources digest sooner than that. So that's where fats would come into play. So now you would say, okay, well, what fat sources digest within 8 hours? And you'll find a list. So then you can start to say, okay, well, if I still like a little bit of carbs, I can have that for flavor, but maybe I'm going to start to bring fats into my meal to help slow the digestion down, give me a more sustained energy if I'm going to have an 8-hour gap between my meals. So that's one way that I would recommend using carbs and fats, is trying to match your digestion rate to the meal timing. And that can help you feel good throughout the day, enough energy, but not too much food, not enough food, kind of a nice little balance of the game. So overall, I think your coach probably did okay with the food selection, but if they did tell you like this is the only thing you can eat, that's not true. There's a lot of options that you can choose from. Cool. Okay. Next question. Does collagen protein build muscles? And conversely, does whey and casein protein build connective tissue? Okay, so does collagen protein build muscles? Not really in isolation by itself. It's would be considered an incomplete protein. So protein is a bunch of amino acids. You can think of them as like building blocks, like if you're building like a log cabin. So you got a bunch of logs and you're trying to build this whole house. So what we would think of is a complete protein is the whole house. Collagen protein gives you a lot of logs, but it's missing a few. So collagen protein, it's going to have some that it's high in, like proline is like high. And the reason why I know that is if you've ever been told to eat the shells of your shrimp. So if you ever eat shrimp and you eat the shell, there's a lot of proline in there. And that can contribute towards connective tissue health. You don't have to do that, but that's how I've heard of that when I was younger and what stuck in my mind. But collagen protein is specific to connective tissue, and especially when you combine it with normal dietary whole food protein sources, assuming somebody's getting moderate to enough protein, and then you combine collagen, you're going to get a kind of an upgrade of connective tissue health. So collagen protein is for connective tissues. That's a good way to think of it. And then whey and casein protein is more complete protein sources, and there's variability within that statement. But in general, whey and casein protein is related more so to muscle tissue repair and growth. And that's because it has its own amino acids. So for example, leucine is kind of like a limiter in protein synthesis, like muscle repair and creation. So whey and casein protein tend to be higher in leucine compared to collagen protein. So whey and casein protein better relates to muscle repair and growth, and collagen protein better relates to connective tissue repair and growth. What you can think of is, to make this a little more simple, if you're hitting your protein targets for the day, and in general it's 0.6 to 1.2 grams, you're going to find that as a general window. If somebody doesn't really lift weights, probably 0.6 is good for them. If you lift weights semi-aggressive, semi-often, and you're not necessarily a bodybuilder but you train and you exercise, probably 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight for protein is plenty sufficient. And then if you are super vigorous in the gym and you kill yourself and you want to be a massive bodybuilder, build as much muscle as possible, you can do 1 to 1.2, and some people even do more than that. If you have that amount of protein that matches your kind of protein demand based on your activity level, chances are you're getting enough whey and casein type proteins. So you can just add a little bit of connective tissue protein, which would be collagen protein if you want, if that's a concern of yours. It's relatively cheap, and my wife, for example, gets an unflavored kind and just blends it into her coffee. You can't even tell it's in there. So that's an option you can use if you're concerned about balancing those two elements, the connective tissue and the muscle tissue. But in general, if you're eating enough protein, you're probably going to get enough for both. But if you want a little extra insurance, you can add the collagen protein to make sure you have enough of the collagen components. However, what you wouldn't want to think of is if you're eating very minimal dietary protein and then you're just going to supplement with a bunch of collagen protein, that is not sufficient for muscle repair and growth. So for example, let's say somebody's supposed to have 120 grams, oops, sorry, just kicked the camera. So let's say somebody's supposed to have 120 grams of protein a day, and they're only getting maybe 60 to 80. And they're like, oh, you know what, I'll just add a couple scoops of collagen protein. that's probably not going to be sufficient. You're going to miss some of the muscle-specific amino acids. So I wouldn't fill the gap with collagen protein. If you have a gap, you would want to fill the gap with whey and casein. Now the difference between whey and casein is whey is faster digesting protein source, casein is a slower digesting protein source. In general, as long as you're eating a couple meals a day and the meals have whole protein sources in them, it's not really going to matter which you choose. Whey tends to taste better than casein protein. I believe it's cheaper as well, but that's nitpicky. So typically I would use whey during the day and casein at night if you're going to use a protein source right before bed. Since casein protein is slower digesting, whey would be faster digesting. If you're going to be asleep for 6 to 8 hours, you would want a slow digesting protein. Now, if you're not getting that from whole food sources, which is what I would recommend, you can use a casein protein to get a nice slow release of protein throughout the night compared to whey protein. Cool. Okay. Next question we have is a training question. Can you explain the importance of controlling the eccentric phase of a repetition? My training partner and I were debating about the proper speed for the concentric phase for strength versus growth, but we wondered how the eccentric phase was affected or changed if your goal was strength versus growth. Okay, so let's go through some of those terms. What is the eccentric and concentric phase of a repetition? A repetition, like when you're doing a rep in the gym, think of a bicep curl. The concentric phase is when the muscle is contracting. So when the muscle is shortening, so that would be when they're curling the dumbbell up. The eccentric phase is when the muscle is extending under weight load, and that would be when you're lowering the dumbbell back down to the bottom. Now, when they're talking about the speed, if we do get muscle stress that would relate to positive adaptations of strength and growth in both phases, the concentric and eccentric phase. We are stronger during the eccentric phase, and studies have suggested that we accrue more of the desired stress that we are able to utilize for adaptations for strength and growth during the eccentric phase. I'm trying to be careful with my wording because you can say kind of the wrong things, and even though the message is correct, the terminology might be a little off. So I want to make sure my terminology is correct. I don't ever want to give you guys misinformation. So the concentric is when you're contracting the muscle. The eccentric is when the working muscle is extending under weight load. The eccentric, when we're extending a muscle under weight load, that is more stressful to the muscle. A muscle is built and designed to contract, to shorten. It's not as efficient at extending under weight load. So what happens is when you extend under weight load, it's more damaging and stressful to the muscle. That then would produce more of an adaptation stimulus that our body says, holy crap, that was miserable. Let me get stronger, let me get bigger, let me adapt to that stimulus so that way it's not as miserable the next time I do it. Now, with that established, the concentric phase, when we're thinking of strength versus growth, there would be less of an argument as the importance of the concentric speed. In general, when you're doing strength, you would want to move something as fast as you can because as it gets heavier, it'll move slow, even if you're trying to move fast. Now, you don't want to move light things ballistically and lose position and get yourself injured. But as things get heavier in strength training, you're going to try to move it faster and faster and faster. But the visual, if you were to film yourself, it doesn't really look any faster. But in your mind, you're trying to perform the concentric as efficiently and as quickly as you can to actually move the weight load. When you're doing growth training, you want the concentric to be under control so that way you can sustain proper position, you can sustain the mind-muscle connection with the actual muscle that you want to be doing the moving. If you move so ballistically and so fast and explosive, you maybe can't tell which muscle moved it. For a lot of movements, think of a chest press. If we're in proper, perfect position, the chest and the triceps are going to do the work. If we get out of position, the front shoulders can actually get incorporated into the contraction as well. So if I'm moving aggressive and explosive so fast that I can't really feel what's happening, then I might be using more triceps or more shoulders and not utilizing the chest as well as I should. So I want to have the concentric phase controlled enough for growth training that I know the actual muscle I want to be doing the contracting is the one under the strain. It is the one doing the dominant percentage of the work. So whatever speed that is for you, that's independent of each individual. You'll see some people train very slow and methodically. Some people will train a little bit faster. For my generation, the example that comes to mind is Branch Warren and Johnny Jackson. You can look up their training styles on YouTube, and they move very fast. But they're massive, and they're under control, even though it looks very fast. Then you can now look at what's more common in today's bodybuilders. I think Eric Janicki is, he just turned pro and he's super big on social media and YouTube. He moves very slow and controlled. Mike Israetel from Renaissance Periodization would be another one who moves very slow and controlled. So you can contrast the concentric speed between those groups of lifters, and they're both, like, both groups are doing great. They're both doing whatever they need to do. They're both massive. They're both, getting their goals. Now, when we think about the eccentric phase, the eccentric phase for strength training should again be controlled, but as fast as you can move while under control. And then the eccentric speed for growth should be controlled at, please, always 100%. And there is, I could see somebody maybe making like a debate about the speed of the eccentric, but in general, you can think of tempo control for the eccentric for growth. And depending on the length of the range of motion, think about the range of motion of a bicep curl versus a barbell squat. You can typically count the eccentric phase around 3 seconds, plus or minus a second. So if I'm doing a movement and maybe it's think of a bicep curl. So if I'm at the top, I'm perfectly contracted, full contraction, and I want to lower the bottom, I'll start and I'll lower at a 3 count. So 3, 2, 1. And that whole time, 3, 2, 1, is the time that I'm using to lower the weight. So that is the eccentric tempo. Now, if I'm doing it at 1, 2, that's not bad, as long as I felt control, as long as the bicep was the one doing the work. I didn't let my shoulder shift forward and let my front shoulder take over. I didn't swing my body. Like a quick, 1, 2, not bad. 3, probably a little better. Now, is 4 better than 3? Meh. If you start to extend the eccentric too long, you start to then limit the weight load that you can use, to the point where you're now sacrificing the weight load stress for an eccentric stress, and there is a balance between those two things. We want to have the maximal weight load we can do with a controlled eccentric, and let's, for reference point, say a 3 count eccentric. So I would want the heaviest weight that I can do for a controlled eccentric. If I increase the control of the eccentric and that causes me to decrease the weight used, I'm now making like a pro, but also a con, and I don't know if I'm really moving ahead. So as you would have to decrease the weight to prolong the eccentric, it would be arguable as to whether that's actually now net positive, or if you just have a +1 and a -1, and now you're actually kind of doing the same thing. So the eccentric speed for growth is extremely important. And in general, I would recommend around a 3 count ±1. With the real key is that you feel under control. The target muscle is the muscle lowering the weight. You don't feel your body moving. You don't feel any other muscle getting included. But also, you're going as heavy as you can while getting all those feelings. Then for strength, the eccentric just needs to move in control enough that you're controlling your position. So the speed on the way down of a squat, as long as you're maintaining proper heel and like pinky toe position, so you're not like caving into your big toe, your knees aren't caving in, you're not shifting forward with your torso, the bar path is still vertical over midline of your foot. As long as all those things are happening, you can move as fast as you can. And in general, that will incorporate more muscle reflex, stretch reflex strength, as you make the turnaround at the bottom of the lift or at the end of the eccentric, and then you're going to go back into the concentric phase. So in strength training, as long as you're maintaining proper position, move as fast as you can. In growth training, as long as the actual muscle you want to be doing the work is under control, then it isn't move as fast as you can. It's move around a 3-count tempo. And you can play with that a little bit. Maybe you're like Branch Warren and Johnny Jackson. Maybe you move a little bit faster. Or maybe you're like Mike Israetel and Eric Janicki and you move a little bit slower. So it's really a matter of preference and what you feel gives you the best mind-muscle connection. So that way you know the muscle's doing the work, the muscle feels maximally stressed, but also under the maximal weight load that you can do that stress. Cool. Okay, next question we have is, how do you manage training energy when you're in a calorie deficit for fat loss? So I'm assuming that they're asking this maybe because they have low energy. So maybe they're going through a diet and they have no energy for training. A couple things come to mind. Number one is train as earlier in the day as you possibly can. If you tend to wait till after work, you're probably just going to be stressed and tired, and you're going to have to be in a calorie deficit if you want fat loss. And the longer you're in a deficit, the more exhausted and fatigued you feel. So if you can, get up early and work out before work. One of my clients actually is a captain on a ship, which is a pretty neat job title. And we were just talking about his days, they're 10 to 12 hour days, super stressful. And he was trying to train after that and realizing like, oh man, I just have crap energy. And sometimes if I go home, if I sit down for half a second, I fall asleep and I miss my workout. So we're switching his schedule now to working out before work. So we're doing workouts that are streamlined, super efficient, but gets all of his needs. He can get in, get out, go to work, and that'll help a lot. So work out as early in the day as you can. That'll definitely help. You can use caffeine, is assuming that you're going to use the caffeine and get your workout in roughly about 6 to 8 hours before you go to bed. So morning or midday kind of training. Caffeine before your workout. Now there's rough windows. It depends on when you're awake and how much food you had and all these other things. But usually around like 30 minutes before your workout is a pretty good time for caffeine, plus or minus 15 minutes, and individual preferences. But that can help, assuming you haven't already pounded down a bunch of caffeine. So if you have 400 to 600 milligrams of caffeine in the morning, and then you take a 200 milligram supplement midday for a midday workout, probably not going to feel that. So it would have to be kind of the predominant caffeine moment of your day for you to be able to feel that. But that is an option. Another thing is to time your calories to where you peak your energy calories pre-workout. This is preferential because sometimes people like to keep their calories for better quality of sleep for the last meal of the day. But if you notice you're having crappy workout energy, you can consume the predominant amount of carbs. If you're having carb-based energy calories, you can consume that about 60 to 90 minutes before the workout, and that'll give you decent energy. And if you're having fats, you would have to have that a little bit more, like 2 to 3 hours ahead of the workout for it to be available, depending on the fat source. But if you're eating carbohydrates, one of the fun things to do with that is people often like carbohydrates, and that can also be a motivator to say, okay, I'm going to have some carbs. And I know that I really like carbs. I'm going to have a larger portion of my carbs. And then in 60 minutes, I'm going to go work out. But I have to, because I ate the carbs. I had that really good meal that I really liked. So now I got to work out. So you can use that actually as motivation to push you to work out as well. You can also use reminders. So remind yourself of your goal, like on the screen, like the wallpaper on your phone screen. I don't know what the proper term for that is, but the background, there you go, that would be a better word, for your phone screen. Have something that's motivational, maybe change it every week so that way it refreshes the motivation. I actually have a notes feature in the dead center of my phone, and I'll put 1 or 2 word kind of motivators for myself. And I don't do it necessarily every week, but I do it whenever I notice that thing isn't having its impact anymore, or I come across something super motivational and something I'm listening to or reading. So I'll put that in that middle of the screen, and that motivates me. You can also do like a pre-workout ritual. So maybe 15 to 30 minutes before the workout, or 5 or 10 minutes, whatever the time frame is. Maybe you have a motivational channel on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or whatever that you can look and say, oh man, this is pretty cool. So I know like Jocko Willink, for example, he has wrote Extreme Ownership, which is a really good book. He takes a picture of his watch and puts that on Instagram. He works out at 4:30 every morning. So he'll show a picture of his watch. Maybe it's 4:29, maybe it's 4:33, but you'll see he posts that. never misses. And that's a motivator for people to be like, well, man, if Jocko's getting it in, and how busy is this dude, running multi-million-dollar businesses, an author, doing all this stuff. If he can do it, so can I, that kind of thing. So there's a couple ideas that you can use. For me, I like the meal timing. I like timing my food ahead of the workout. I do use a pre-workout, assuming I'm not working out in the evening. I tend to work out more like midday. So I'll use a pre-workout to give me a little bit of an energy boost. And then the other thing is I just know I'm maybe not going to feel like working out. So some days I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of tired. Who gives a shit? I don't it doesn't matter if I'm tired, I want the goal. If I want to get bigger muscles, if I want to get leaner, if I want to get stronger, I got to work out. I don't ask myself if I feel like working out. I'm just like, I'm supposed to work out, so I'm going to go work out. And 100% of the time, once I start the workout, I feel great, and I wish I would have started earlier because then I could do longer, but I run out of time. So one thing, I guess that would be my last tip, is don't ask yourself if you feel like working out. Who gives a shit? That's not important. If you want the outcome of the workout, you got to do the workout. So just work out. There you go. Okay. Next question. How do you keep yourself motivated when you're overwhelmed in life? My work-life balance is all work at the moment, and I'm struggling to eat my meals consistently. How do you keep up with best habits when you don't have your best to give? Ooh, very good question. I love that wording in the last part there. How to Be an Imperfectionist by Stephen Guise, Guise is his last name. That's a really good book. And then Atomic Habits, and I just blanked on the author's name. Dang it anyhow. Actually, it might be the same person. I just blanked on the name. So just look up Atomic Habits, and there's Elastic Habits is a good book that's basically the same thing. So let's go with Elastic Habits because I think that's Stephen Wise as well. That's Stephen Guise, Guise. So Elastic Habits and then How to Be an Imperfectionist. Those two books will be great resources. The reason why is Elastic Habits will teach you how to create your best habits, but saying like, this is how I can meet this habit on the best day, on an okay day, and then like the worst day ever. So it gives you an example of how to create tiers, T-I-E-R-S, or levels to how to meet an individual habit. And then How to Be an Imperfectionist is learning to accept that, okay, if I have a best option, but all I can do today is my okay option, that has to be good enough. I have to choose to do that and move on. Okay beats nothing. Every time. So if my options are this is the best I could do, this is okay, and then this is the least I could possibly do, any of those three beats nothing every single time. So How to Be an Imperfectionist teaches you how to not be an all or nothing type person where if I can't do the best, I'm not going to do anything at all. That's stupid. Absolutely stupid. So the reason why that's stupid is saying that doesn't then be like, well, if I can't do the best, I'm going to do nothing at all. So instead of doing nothing at all, I'm going to do the best. No, if you can't do the best because of a million things outside of your control, you can't do it. It just literally it's outside of your control. So do anything else better, and that's better than nothing. So don't do all or nothing and think like, well, that's going to motivate me to always do the all. Bullshit. No, it won't. So the better way to think of it is I will never not do something. I'm going to do something every time. And I've had goals where I worked out every single day for a year, and I've done that for multiple years. I've done a bunch of different goals. I remember one time I did 10 months of 6 a.m. cardio. I had to do 20 minutes of cardio every day at 6 a.m. If I couldn't do it at 6 a.m., I had to do it earlier, between midnight and 6 a.m. So I had to get up even earlier. There was no way to make it up later in the day. When the clock hit 6, I had to do my cardio. If there was something like I was traveling that day, if I was, whatever reason, I had to get it in earlier. That was my rule. And I did that for 10 months, never missed a single day. So I've done a lot of goals like that, a ton of them over the years. And having goals where I'm going to get something in, it doesn't even really matter. I have an idea of what I want to be the best thing, but it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, I'm going to do something. So those goals where I had to try to do exercise every day of the year, some days it was like, okay, I am dead tired. I am miserable. I laid in bed and I actually realized I didn't work out yet. So I would just do 10 push-ups in my bed and then go to bed. Does 10 push-ups, is that really going to make a difference? Hell no. But does it mentally make a difference? Yes. So physical difference, no. Mental difference, yes. Because those were 10 push-ups I didn't have to do and I wouldn't normally have done. But I chose to do it to stay disciplined and stay in touch with my goal. So then, whenever opportunities would arise and it's like, oh, I'm not in bed yet. It's only 9 o'clock. I normally maybe go to bed at like 10 or 10:30. I haven't worked out yet. Well, maybe I'll set a 10-minute timer and I'll just do some bodyweight squats and push-ups. So all of a sudden, I catch it a little bit earlier and it becomes 10 minutes rather than 10 push-ups. So those little things where you build your mental discipline to do some things allows you to improve what those somethings are over time. And that is how you make continual progression. So you always want to be doing something because something can always get better. But nothing is nothing. So those are the two books I would recommend reading. How to Be an Imperfectionist and Elastic Habits by Stephen Guise, both books. And I use the premises of those books as a way to stay motivated when I'm overwhelmed, knowing that, okay, if my normal standard here is an hour-long workout, and that's just not going to happen today, I can still be motivated to work out if I accept that a 10-minute walk is better than nothing. If I accept that 5 minutes of squats is better than nothing. If I accept that I'm just going to walk loops around my kitchen while I microwave my last meal of the day, that's better than nothing. So that's how you stay consistent with your best habits, is giving yourself options and allowances for variability in how you meet those best habits. Cool. Okay, next question. We actually have 4 business questions, so this is fun. So first business question we have: what aspect of your job do you like the least or find the hardest? That's a good question. Maybe a sad question or depressing question. What do I like the least? Watching somebody with potential unfulfilled, by far. Oh my God, does that probably every personal trainer's worst thing is when somebody comes to you and they ask you for help. You're like, oh man, given your situation, given your goals, if you do this, you'll get there. And then they just don't do it. And you're like, oh my God. Okay, well, if we can't do it in this way, maybe we do it in this way. So you start teaching them the elastic habits thing. If we can't do the best thing, maybe we can do this thing. And then they're not even doing that. And you're like, oh, what the hell? What's wrong? Why are we doing these things? Is it messed up with our schedule? Do you not have the resources necessary? Are you just lacking motivation? You lacking drive? What do you need that I can help fill that gap so we can get this done? So you can become what you want to become, because that makes me feel happy and excited for myself that I was able to help somebody in that way. So when people, I don't know what the proper terminology is, but when you can see them have a better outcome than what they're doing, it's like, damn, because you can't do the work for them. You can give them every freaking direction and step and possible way to do it, but you can't do it for them. That is, without a doubt, the most frustrating thing. And what I like the least about the job is when you can see that somebody could be better, but they're not doing it, and you can't control that. So that would be the answer to that. The least favorite aspect of the job. Next question. If you don't think a client is properly following your programming, how do you approach a conversation with them to address it? This would be client to client, because everybody's emotional capacity and the way in which you speak to them is a little different. Some people, I grew up with what I call tough love. My parents, my dad, I can't even tell you the number of times my dad told me to get my head in my ass growing up. And that was what I grew up with. And if I did something dumb, even if I didn't know it was dumb, it was a mistake. And he's like, what are you doing? Get your head out of your ass. And he'd show me how to do it. I'm like, geez, Whiz, okay, fine. So I'm okay with that. And I guess I've had to be emotionally, I've had to learn to be okay with that. But that is a type of talk that is fine with me. So if I were trying to learn something and somebody's like, well, that's pretty stupid. I told you to do it this way. This is the best way to do it. That's why I told you that. So let's just do it this way. I'd be like, okay, geez, that's a little aggressive. Okay. But then I would just go do it and I'm fine. So they cared enough to correct me. Maybe they could have done it a little bit nicer, but they cared enough to correct me. So now I'm on the right path and I'm doing things good. So I'm okay with that. But the majority of people, that's actually unnecessary and not even the best way to talk to somebody. So I don't do that. So what I would do is I would say, let's say, for example, it has happened. Well, I have a client getting ready for a powerlifting competition. I'm going to give you an actual example. I had a client getting ready for a powerlifting competition. They were around, like, say, 8 to 10 pounds overweight. And we're starting maybe 8 weeks ahead. And I'm like, okay, let's do this nutritionally. You'll be fine. We have 8 weeks to lose 8 pounds. Like, no worries. You can lose 8 pounds in one night if we just want to water deplete. But let's lose some body fat. Let's clean up a little bit. Let's look a little better. And that was part of their motivation for doing it, was to lose body fat. So all of a sudden we're, 2 weeks in, and it's like, oh, the weight hasn't really moved. That's odd, given the nutrition parameters, given the fact that we're still training. I would have assumed it went down, but you never know. As a female, so I'm like, yeah, maybe it's that time of the month, so we're holding more water and the body's just stressed, so let's just keep going. So now we go another 2 weeks, and it's like, oh man, scale hasn't moved at all. If it was the time of the month, that time's gone now. So what's going on? And they're like, well, I'm following everything. I'm following the nutrition program. I'm like, okay, well, should have worked. Like, we should have seen something. Are we having poor sleep quality? Like, maybe we're having greater water retention because our sleep is really crap. I said, how's your stress levels? In there, everything's good. So now we go another week, and it's like 3 weeks out, and weight hasn't changed. It's like, oh man, something's up. Can you send me photos of your foods? So when you eat breakfast, can you send me a photo of breakfast? When you eat lunch, can you send me a photo of lunch? I want to see. Maybe maybe the measurements are off, or maybe we're miscommunicating a little bit on some of the foods. Then all of a sudden, what you'll find is you don't get the photos. So this is when you start to really know, okay, something's happening. So you don't get a photo, and then you see them the next week, and now we're only like 2 weeks out. And they're like, oh yeah, I just, it's really hard to remember. I was really busy and blah, 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 blah. So you're like, okay, bullshit. Because if it was important to you, you would have sent photos. It takes literally 5 seconds. So probably we're not eating the program. This is what I'm saying to them. This isn't what I'm saying to them. This is what I'm thinking internally. I'm like, okay, they're not sending me the photos because they're doing something wrong. 100% of the time when somebody doesn't want to send you information, it's because they're not doing it. If somebody's doing something, they want the accolades for doing it. So they're going to send you the photos. They're going to send you the report. They're going to send you the information. They're going to send you the text. Like, if they're doing it, they want to hear, hey, good job. They want to hear that. So they're going to send you the information. So when somebody doesn't send you stuff, that's almost a 100% indicator they're not actually doing it. So in her example, when we met for the training session 2 weeks before the meet, I said, hey, our weight hasn't moved. And at that point, who knows, might have went up a pound or two. I said, it hasn't moved, and it's really kind of impossible for that to happen given the parameters that we have. The reason why I asked for the photos was I wanted to just see, double check, if I'm saying to measure out 100 grams of rice, are you measuring out 100 grams of weight, or are you like looking to see how much of rice gives you 100 grams of carbs? There's a little bit of difference there. So we got to figure out, is there something we're doing that maybe we just don't recognize is messing this up? Because I really want you to be successful, and as we get closer and closer, what we have to do to get these 8 pounds off is going to be harder and more stressful for you to do, and it's going to have more of a negative impact on our performance. It's really not going to be the best option whenever we could do a couple things now that are way less negatives, much easier, and it'll get us where we want to be. Like, what's going on? And if you express it and explain it and share concern, and the focus is always on what's best for them, and, hey, like, we expressed that this was our goal. I really want you to reach this goal. I know it's going to make you really happy. If there's anything happening at the moment, like if we're not doing the food, if we're eating extra, maybe the food was too low and you had really bad energy, and maybe you thought to yourself, as like, oh, I must be mentally weak. He thought I could do this, and now I'm going to eat these foods, but I'm not going to tell him because I don't want him to, think bad of me. Oh, don't worry about that. So I'd rather know so that way I can help you. It's always being very kind, very caring, and you want to always have them be the focus, not the goal be the focus. Like, you want them to reach the goal because you care about them, right? So in her example, she was like, well, I've been following the plan, but I do have like a soda every day when I train. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, like a diet soda? And of course it wasn't, so it's like, damn it. And then it was, oh, when the kids come home, sometimes they'll leave snacks out, so I'll kind of finish their snacks a little bit. If they have a couple pieces on a candy or an extra bite or two, I'll kind of eat that up. And then, oh, well, and sometimes when my husband and I have a stressful day, we like to have a glass of wine at the end of the night. So you start realizing, oh, okay, you're having 60 grams of sugar soda drink every day. So right there's 200 some calories. Little nitbits, of calories here and there from your kids' snacks. A glass of wine, Yeah, okay, maybe no wonder like the weight hasn't moved. So then it's like, okay, well, since we only have 2 weeks left, do you think we can drop the soda for the next 2 weeks? Or, what can we have half a soda? Can we find maybe an energy drink or something else that has like half the sugar? What can we do here? And then you solve that problem. Then you say, okay, snacks with the kids, let's solve that problem. The wine at night, let's solve that problem. So you go through and you try to figure it out. But typically, if I don't think somebody's following the program, I'm going to approach it as in, I care about you. I want you to reach your goals. If there's something that is causing us to maybe not adhere to the program, can you let me know? Like, can you share it with me? Can you let me in? I want to help. So in that case, I'll often tell them the story of another client who maybe was in a similar situation, or a story from myself, or maybe I struggled in a similar situation. So that way I can show relatability, and I can show that, it's okay. I'm a comfort space. I'm a safe space. They can talk to me. And then usually whatever the issue is opens up and we can address it. So that's how I approach it, because I think a soft touch is usually the best. Another way to think of it is if they're paying for a personal trainer and or nutritionist, it's important to them. Like, they're giving money, they're giving time, they're giving effort. So this is important. Chances are, if they are messing up and they're aware that they're messing up, they are already beating the crap out of themselves emotionally and mentally. You don't need to add to that, and adding to that doesn't help. It doesn't make them feel better. It doesn't make them feel more proactive. It doesn't make them, if anything, they get more defensive. They're going to get mad at you. So just recognize they do care. They are maybe just in a new place. They're unknown. They don't know what to do. Maybe somebody in their past judged them poorly and they're afraid you're going to do the same. So approach it with love and care and concern, and focus on the individual. And I think that'll help with how you approach it. Okay. Next question, we got last 2 questions here, is what are some time management skills you use to minimize your workload without minimizing your work quality? If I could answer this, I'd be a millionaire. So there's a lot of time management skills. Self-help books. Just look at any self-help book. I listen to them all the time. The only 2 categories of material that I consume in audiobooks is self-help and business. I look like a mess if you were to look at my Audible library. But staying time management. I think what helps is staying disciplined to. Well, here's a concept. I'm gonna unload a very minimal amount of what's out there in the world to you. So there's an 80-20 principle. Is this 100% accurate? Probably not, but it's a good premise. About 80% of what you do, 80% of your positive outcome as a trainer in a business. So 80% of what makes you money. Let's think of it that way. 80% of what makes you successful. The 80-20 rule is you probably only spend 20% of your time doing that, and then 80% of your time doing a bunch of crap that only gets you a 20% return. So the 80-20 rule is, 20% of what I do gives me 80% of my return, but I spend 80% of my time doing stuff that only gives me 20% of my return. So there you go. Kind of think of it that way. What your job can do, is to figure out what is the 20% that gives me my 80%. I have been asking myself this question since the first day I ever started doing this as a job, and I'm continually asking myself this question every single day because over time it changes. But for me, my main focus is communication quality with clients, and I am still learning that. I am still getting that figured out, because there's so much other crap you have to do in life that gets in the way. And some of it isn't even crap. That's maybe a bad way of saying it is. There is crap. But then there's stuff you actually enjoy and stuff you like, but it's just not business. So I like spending time with my wife Meredith and our dog Daisy. I want to be able to go for walks. I want to be able to get up in the morning, cuddle on the couch. I want to get to, be able to cuddle on the couch at night. I want to share time with them. So that's going to be something that isn't work, but I want to do. I like to work out. So believe it or not. So that's something that is for me. Now I can film some things here and there, but sometimes I just want to work out. I just want to enjoy it. I don't want to make it a business thing. So there are things we do that we like to do. There are things we do that we don't like to do. But there's stuff that we do that we have to do, that we want to do, that isn't the work stuff to do. That doesn't give us that 80% return. So then in the time that we're spending doing our work, we can say to ourselves is, how directly does this contribute to my business making money? Does this fulfill the need of current clients? Does this bring in new clients? And then within each of those questions, how well does it do that? So if I'm looking at client communication, if I'm typing up a newsletter that's going to go out to every one of my clients, and that takes me an hour, or I have direct one-on-one communication with my clients that maybe I typically do every 5-ish days. I try to do it like it's in our kind of contract to be once a week. I try to do it more often than that. I try to do it twice a week. So it averages out to about once every 3 to 5 days that I communicate to people. And then with my life being crazy, who knows, maybe it has to extend to a week every now and then. But I try to do it every 3 to 5 days. So if I'm typing an hour long for a newsletter, or I have people who have one-on-one communications that are at like 6 days out, I shouldn't spend the hour doing the newsletter because most people aren't going to really give a shit about that newsletter or read the newsletter. That's just the way life works. I'll be better off spending that hour doing those one-on-one communications because one-on-one communication matters more to my clients than that newsletter does. So I would think to myself is, is this helping my current clients? Is it ensuring my current money? How well is it doing that? Is this the most direct way that I can do that? If not, don't do it. Delegate it, delete it, defer. Or if it is, how do I do it even better, even faster? And like for me, for example, over the years, when I was communicating with people, it would be via email. But email is really inefficient because all your communications are spread across how many different emails. And not all emails come in one thread because somebody sends you a random email that isn't part of the previous email. Or if they're all in one thread, they're so damn hard to look back and find other details, like other data. So I switched all my clients to a Google Drive document. So just an online doc, Google Doc. And now it's this ongoing, ever continuous single document. It looks like Microsoft Word, but it's a Google product, so they have to call it something else. It's just one document that's forever. And anything we ever write in there is all now easy to reference. I can just do Control F, find a term or find a date, or I can scroll back, find what I said back here, what they said back there. It's so much faster. So that was something where I know one-on-one communication is important for my clients. It is a high quality concept, but how do I do that better? So does this take care of money in the now? Yes, no. If yes, how do I do it better? If no, don't do it. And then does this bring in new clients? Like, does it give me new money? Same thing. How well does it do that? What is my conversion rate? If I make 3 posts a day on Instagram, does that get me more clients than only 2 posts, than only 1 post? If I'm spending 3 a day, like I'm spending time during the day making 3 posts on Instagram, but nothing on YouTube, nothing on TikTok, nothing on Facebook, nothing on LinkedIn, would I be better off served only doing 2 posts a day on Instagram, but then starting adding in those other components? You got to experiment. You got to figure that out. So that's usually, you can think of it as kind of those 2 categories. I know there's other categories like how do I, kind of track finances, how do I do all these other things. But is what takes care of the money I have now, what makes me money in the future, and then is what I'm doing the absolute best return on investment? If not, don't even do it. Table that, come back to it later, another time. And then what gives you that, like what 20% of work gives you the 80% return? Start making that 20% of the work 80% of the work. And now you're going to get a way bigger return. I don't know if that was helpful, but that's kind of my current trending thoughts. There are an infinite number of books that can help with time management, so much so that I'm even like blanking on even recommending them because there's like an influx of 1 billion titles being downloaded to my brain, so I can't think of them. But The 4 Disciplines of Execution is a pretty good book. And that would be one that I've listened to relatively recently that would be pretty helpful to listen to. So time management, you can think of it as time because we all have a definitive amount of time, 24 hours a day. How well do we spend it? But then also energy management, that's something to consider. Is when is the best time to do things? How do you have better energy? By paying attention to better quality of sleep, better quality of food, making sure you're physically active during the day. Believe it or not, exercise increases productivity. So if you spend 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes doing exercise, you actually will increase your productivity of the time you actually do the work greater than the 30 to 40 minutes. They've shown that with meditation, meditation has a greater return on investment in regards to reducing stress and allowing productivity. So you can actually do meditation. That's been, kind of proven in real world application to have a greater return on productivity than the time spent doing it. So there's a lot of things you can look into. But that's at least my current trend of thought, and a book recommendation is the 4 Disciplines of Execution. Last question. How do you answer a client's question when you don't know the answer? So if somebody asks me something and, what's the best supplement for XYZ? And I'm like, you know what? I'm not really sure. I could spit an answer out to you, but I haven't looked into that topic for a little bit of time. So let me update my knowledge and I'll get back to you in 24 hours. So that's typically how I answer it. I'll just say, the short version is, I don't know yet. Let me go find it and then I'll get back to you. And then I usually give them a timeline because it gives me a timeline and it keeps me more disciplined to getting the answer back. But I make it a realistic timeline. I'm not going to say like, after our session, I'll message you this within the next hour, but I have a client in the next hour. So that's not going to happen. So usually I give myself 24 hours and then I find out that answer that night. Or if it's more in depth, so maybe they had some kind of weird nagging injury or they have a digestive issue. And they're like, what do you think is going on? I'll be like, well, can you send me your food history? Let me see the foods you're eating. And then I'll go through this week, try to figure out what might be the allergens that could be the risk. And over the weekend, I'll write up a list of maybe things we want to try to avoid next week. So that's kind of the way I approach it is I explain that I don't know yet. I'll go find the answer, and then here's when I'll deliver it. That is the typical approach that I use. When you work with a client, there's going to be a lot of things that that they don't know, so there's a lot of things you can help them with, but it's okay if you don't know something. You're a collaborative effort, you're a team. So if they don't know and they're asking you and you don't know, that's fine. They trust you, you're smart, you have a lot of certifications, you've done a lot of things, you could probably find the answer and better decipher the good answers versus bad answers than they could, and then you can get that information back to them. So essentially, you're like an assistant. They're going to say, oh man, I wish I knew this. I don't have the time or the knowledge for how to do that. Can you do that? Yes, I can do that. Okay, thank you. Done, right? So that's your job, is you're a team, and your job is to go find that answer. It's okay if you don't know yet, go figure it out. Never, ever, ever give an answer if you don't know if it's the right answer. You can even preface that and say, I'm not 100% certain. This is what I normally would tell people, blah, 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 blah. But let me double check that. So you can say that, but be honest. Don't ever fudge it and then try to make it up later or fix it later. Just be truthful with what you know or don't know, and then go find it out for them, save them the work, and deliver it in a timely manner so that way they get their answer, you get your education, and the team moves on smarter and better off for it. Cool. Okay, so that's everything. If you want to submit questions for the Patreon Q&A, remember you can sign up at patreon.com/C3 method, the 3 spelled out THREE, so CTHREE method. You can reach out to us for our services at c3method.com. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube under the name C3 Method. However you will find us, however you reach out, I hope that you do. If you need anything, let me know. I'm always here and I'm always happy to help. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I hope this was helpful.